Hello everyone สวัสดีค่ะ Welcome to the Ecovillage Talk series organized by Gaia Ashram and GENOA, the Global Ecovillage Network, Oceania and Asia. We have been organizing the talk to learn from different eco-villages in our Asia region, and this is our third episode 3, which we are having a very special guest today to share their story with us. They will introduce themselves quickly, but let me introduce myself first. My name is Om Sunisa Jamisit Daitas. I am co-founder of Gaia Ashram Ecovillage. It's a 12 years old Ecovillage in Udon Thani, northeast of Thailand. And today I'm very happy to learn from our close friend from Panpan Ecovillage. But I also like to introduce first Natalie from GENOA, who is also co-hosting our talk today. Natalie, please let us know more about you and also GENOA.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Give me a wave if you
Very
can
well.
hear me. Okay, good. Nice to be here. My name's Natalie. I live in Chiang Mai, not too far from Phum, and I'm a regenerative designer. I'm working with GENOA and helping to keep the eco-village spirit growing in Asia. Actually, Phum was my first connection along with IWP with a mud building course I did 9 years ago, which literally grounded me into the life I have now. And I'm extremely grateful for the teachers on that program and for the way it laid foundations for the whole of my rest of my regenerative life here. So yeah, we're very honored to have Greg and Rampai with us today, calling in from Northern Thailand. Greg, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Phum?
Yeah, okay. I'm Greg, and hopefully my wife will be joining me. She's generously putting our daughter to bed right now. But I've been at Phum for a little over 10 years now. Phum itself has been here for 22 years. So it's been here a good amount of time, but in some ways it's just beginning. As it goes in the life of developing a village, it's really just beginning. But those 10 years for me went by pretty fast, and similar to you, it has been a very transformative, unexpected occurrence. I came here as a teacher for a Buddhist university from Colorado, actually, and came through here exploring Buddhism and crossed paths incidentally, serendipitously with John Dai and a handful of others, and met them and met him and met his view and my wife, and a lot of things came together quickly. And long story short, here I am 10 years later.
Wow. Yeah. So would you like to share a bit more how is the life at Phum, so then get people to imagine a little bit, like as you continue to share your story, so they can link and
Sure.
then having a bit of the connection. What is the philosophy? What are the vision and mission? What is the intention of creating this community? And how is the day-to-day life like there?
Yeah, well, the word that really stands out to me there, Om, is intention. I think I've heard Joe say before that Phum is an unintentional community, and that has served as both a blessing and a curse over the years. You know, in many ways, I think it's why we've been able to stick together, because there aren't like solid rules here. There isn't much of a strong mission necessarily, other than to keep learning. But everyone has a different definition of what that means. And so, you know, I think anyone here you talk to is going to have a different origin story. But as I remember hearing Joe say, it was a combination of many things, where he, like so many people throughout the world now who have been really affected by this, you know, whether it's the American dream or whatever version of modernity has convinced people that there's a better life somewhere else, and so they need to leave their world to go seeking something. He left to go to the city to make a lot of money. And as I remember hearing, he actually saw like a bird, and like the bird was building a nest on the patio of his apartment. And he was pretty depressed and unhappy with his life there in Bangkok. He realized he'd been there for a while and wasn't really succeeding in his goal of like getting ahead. And yet this bird, who he'd been observing for only a couple days, he built a house for his family very quickly. And so he kind of had this epiphany that life is much easier than what we typically think. And, you know, long story short, he went back home to Isan and started exploring again farming, but with a new view. You know, typically we have this view that farming is very difficult. And he was like, I don't think so. It doesn't seem to be so difficult for all things in the natural world. And so he started experimenting with that more, and was pretty successful with it. Everything from adobe earthen building, you know, Banding building, which incidentally was inspired by a trip that he took to where I'm from, the southwest of the United States, where the Native American people for thousands of years have been building homes out of mud. And when he saw that, he was like, we should do that in Thailand. And you can do that anywhere for sure. You're just adapting a bit to your local bioregion. And so a big part of Pun Pun is building with earth. And then for anyone who's involved with farming or sustainable living of any kind, you know that eventually everything leads back to seeds. And so inevitably, Joe came to seed. And if we do have a mission statement here, or a shared view, a goal, it's to save seeds. Ultimately, we're trying to save seeds and make sure that seeds are kept alive and easily accessible.
So it's like coming back to life, coming back to the basics, starting from building up like what we have, what coming back to our basic needs. How can we make it easy with the food, with the house, and start doing more of seed saving, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, cool. And now you have any other question for Greg?
Yeah, I mean, you were telling us a little bit about how you discovered Pun Pun, but what made you want to join it as a community member?
Yeah, well, I guess it was same. I think this is relatively true for most people at Pun Pun. Like there's no form or application you fill out. There's no link on the website. Everything that is at Pun Pun happens organically, for sure. And again, that's a blessing and a curse. It creates a lot of very intense challenges, and it also allows things to develop naturally. And so I didn't plan to live here, and neither really did my wife. It just naturally fell into place. I'm from a very different world. I had no plans on living in Thailand. Farming wasn't on my radar, you know, at all. But it was just, you know how it goes. One thing leads to another. And after a while, something really clicked when I met Joe, the way he talks. And really his passion for seed really spoke to me in a deep way, you know. I grew up in a world where I didn't even really know that food I didn't know where it came from besides the store. You know, I grew up on microwave dinners and fast food. But the depth, the culture, the identity, all of these things that come alive when you really look at seed really spoke deeply to me and answered questions that I'd been asking that I didn't really know I was asking. And it just made a lot of sense to stay here longer, which I did. And then I met my wife. And so that kind of stepped up the initiatory process.
Yeah, that tend to change our life plans.
Yeah.
And how is it like that when you have a personal life, as you have you have your wife, you have your kids? How is it for the personal life and raising a child in an eco-village in regarding to a private space, personal space, and communal space? How is that why it plays in the in Pun Pun, for example? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk for days about this. This is such a sensitive topic and an important one, you know, for especially I think for me, or you know, because I come from the United States, where we really have an intense focus on space and the individual. And the more I, you know, look deeply into this, it seems like that obsession is absolutely related to the root of so much of our traumas, our inabilities to share and come together intimately. And yet, just because we want to do it doesn't mean it is easy to do. Like I remember, I think it was a talk you were having, with Kai, and I think you said that a village takes thousands of years to create. And that's very true. You know, like, and the more, one of my teachers, this man by the name of Martin Prichtel, he's a Native American, and he really talks a lot about this. And you see it played out in the Ecovillage life a lot, where you're like, there's certain challenges that I probably won't be able to master in my lifetime, you know, but we keep doing it for the benefit of the next generation. Like I have certain struggles at 42 that there's just habitual habits that I don't know if I'll overcome. One of those is a need to have individual space. And so it's always challenging for me, but it's not challenging for everyone here because they don't come from that background. You know, most of the people here come from a rural Thai village where like living in community is very commonplace. Like we have every meal together. We do everything together. That's a shock to someone who doesn't do that.
Right. Well, how do you manage? I mean, how do you manage with that need in the Thai in the Thai, such a Thai oriented community? How do you manage as someone coming from a different background?
Well, I think you know, that's going to be answered differently for different people, right? But for me, I've just made it a part of my, you know, for lack of a better word, my spiritual practice. I know that this is important, you know. It's really hard for me. It's super hard for me, but I know it's important, and I can see already that it has a great benefit on my daughter, and it's ultimately for her. And I think this is parallel to like saving seeds. Like it's like we're saving seeds not for us. Like it's for a time we will never see, you know, people we will never know. That's why you do this. And like a lot of building community to me is very parallel to that view. And so becoming, you know, trying to, you know, overcome that stress seems, it's a part of maturing, right? It's a part of maturing, which I haven't done yet. I'm determined to do it.
It's something I believe also that it's something we learn, we experience, and somehow we pass on to the next generation to continue that learning journey. So I have that share of belief like you also. I think I share the struggles in our Gaia Ashram community also. I think it's happening in many communities. How can we find a balance between the private space and then communal space? For us, for me personally, coming to see how I can create my private space in the mental area as well. To stop thinking for everyone else for a moment. And just thinking for our own, coming to our own personal unit, thinking for ourselves. Sometimes when we are so involved, it can go so much all the time in the collective space. I think that's what I learned from our experience here. Now I'd like to pass on to Na if she has any other question that she wants to explore, help us explore deeper in any aspect of Pan.
I was just listening to both of you and thinking this is the ultimate mindfulness practice, right? To live in the situation that's challenging you and reminding you to be inside yourself all the time. And you mentioned your daughter, Greg. So that's a relatively new addition to the 10 years you've been at Pan. How is it to raise a family in community compared to your experience and then, you know, what you see around you?
Yeah, I mean, all of these things are challenging, but I think it's like everyone, like the nice thing about, I think how a community needs to work is there needs to be some kind of view that's beyond our own want,
Mm.
and if it's seed and children, then eventually it's gonna come together, and people aren't gonna run away when they're having a tense time, because it's not about you.
Mm.
And Pun Pun has that. So even like we have like our normal tiffs among each other. Some people have their view of how to raise children, and other people have different views of how to raise children. And some people have a view of mindfulness, and some people don't. Some people want to eat organic. Some people actually don't care. Some people, which seems to shock people when they come here.
Diversity.
But there is this thread of we're devoted to something bigger than us. And people may define that differently, but it's very noticeable. And so with that energy pretty solid, I feel like it's a pretty good place to have children, because no matter what, people aren't going to walk by the child if the child is in need. There's always this like default knee-jerk understanding that we got to take care of the kids, we got to take care of the seeds.
It's that saying, it takes a village to raise a child. So, and I think that to me, like I grew up in the West, and it's very much, you're just with your mom most of the time, and you don't have, we didn't have relatives nearby us, so it was just us and her really. So I could see, like, when I've come to Pun Pun and I see like the kids, they play with each other as well as other kids in the village, right? So
yeah,
they have companionship, they have kind of like a cousin built in. And then I guess they have not million, they have several aunts and uncles who can all bring their character and their wisdom into their lives, which is something I really would appreciate, I think, as a kid, maybe even as a parent as well, to have those different viewpoints around them.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think interesting in the aspect you talk about diversity of how people approach think differently, like approach their how to raise a child philosophy, and how to do things differently. And you mentioned that eventually when people come to the common goal, common vision together, and then that diversity and that differences was able to be embraced. Can you share us a few insights on what is that common goal, common thing of the Pun Pun that make people feel like we have something bigger together, that helping them able to tolerate the differences?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think some of that, like it's interesting also, Pun Pun is cross-cultural, there's a lot of different people from different cultural backgrounds. And I can't speak with authority about the Thai mind, but what I've noticed is certainly compared to an American, we talk all the time and we like process every little detail and like think about, why are we doing this? What is this for? Probably to a fault, but that's how we do it. And a lot of Thai are not like that. Like, so there's certainly people in our community. I don't know why they're here. I don't know what the like deep vision is. I'm sure there is one though, like I feel like everyone here has a strong intention. I don't know what all the intentions are though. It's very unique in that way at Pun Pun. Like I'm sure you've experienced some villages you go to, it's like literally painted on the wall. Like, why people are here. It's not like here. I do think some people come here because it's easier to be here than it is in like Bangkok. Personally, I don't think that's the best reason, but hey, it's an in, and like from that the seed will grow, and when the conditions are ripe, it always seems to go someplace magical.
Yeah, I think I find that very interesting. Yeah, from what you're sharing, if I imagine for people who don't know Pun Pun, you might see as like a community that coming together in a quite loose. I mean, like not so much structures, like what you say, not like having a very clear set goal, together, but there's something that hold people together,
Yeah.
even in the challenge of diversity and communication. It's very, very curious to find out what is that. But I think from what you share, we can see like this the spirit of coming back to the basic and then make life a bit more easier, as the philosophy originally like used to find the Pan by Tijo, the founder of this place. Yeah, I think interesting to explore. That's very interesting. Maybe we can move on to the next thing also, like how would that, what make you what are the rewards and challenges? I mean, there must be some kind of rewards that keep people there.
Yeah.
There are some challenges that you share, but what are some rewards that keep people there or keep you there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of rewards, you know. I mean, the biggest one, to me, like, I'm really, you know, I've been doing a lot of writing lately that's really exploring like this whole, what I feel is a disease that is modernity. Like this whole thing that is modernity that's kept us severed from like living naturally. And like, what's at the root of that? Like all the you know, identities that separate us, you know, et cetera. You can go on and on. I know you were into deep ecology. All of this is explored within that subject, right? But when you come together and force yourself to live together, and you're radically, intimately living with nature, you know, we have lizards on our walls, you know, we have cobras coming through our house. I mean, you can't escape the intensity, the magic, the energy, the pulsing vibrance of life. And like when you feel that, you feel good, you know. And sometimes it's really nerve-wracking. Sometimes it makes you feel really, you know, uncomfortable, but ultimately it's like really challenging this, like the weird numbness and anxiousness that modernity is kind of force-fed all of us directly or indirectly. And so the reward is feeling natural, is feeling authentically human, even though that often means you're more sensitive, and there's a whole nother thing to explore there. That doesn't always feel good, but it's real. It's not this weird, buzzy, modern numbness that you so often get when you're just doing the 9 to 5, living in an apartment, eating from 7-Eleven thing.
Feeling very alive.
Very alive. Even when the aliveness is, you know, I can't handle being with all these people right now, but I have to because we only have one kitchen. But then you realize you're never alone, and you realize when you know, we built our house, basically we built it in 3 weeks because we have so many people helping. And I can plant my I have a whole garden zone here it's quite large, and I can prepare the whole thing in like basically one day if everyone comes and helps, which if I ask, everyone surely will.
Yeah, right. There's a lot of
one thing
support.
That I was just thinking, like something you said earlier about there's not like a sentence painted on a wall somewhere, and there's freedom. This is, I think, one of the rewards you're speaking to, right? Although the modern life is restrictive and it's contained, and there's like a standard that everyone seems to expect everyone to fit in, the life you're describing seems to have a lot more freedom, and with it obviously comes the responsibility. So you have to make the decisions, but you have that agency over your life. You can be the director of your story, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's very true.
Right. So before we move on to the next question, I just want to make the announcement to people who are listening in on our Zoom live and also on the Facebook live. If you have any questions you want to ask Greg, or you want to us to go into a deeper dialogue about, please feel free to send us a message on the chat. So then we will try to gather the question and then explore that together. We will carry on our talk until 8 o'clock. So you can keep raise questions whenever you have one come up in mind. Okay. So yeah, I think I really like to explore on the aspect of what sustained it. I mean, what you share is like what brought me here, what brought people together. It's some kind of like some common shared values, which what we can sense from what you share. It could be the basic lifestyle, the community life where people help each other, support each other, which each one may have a different answer of what drawn them to Pan, and also what keep them there. And we could hear from your aspect for today. And we want to hear now what from your perspective, what sustained the community. You can also share what built the community and what sustained it. Because Pan is like 22 years old community.
Yeah. Okay.
How to build and how to sustain it. Even like people maybe not having a lot of saying like set of goals and structures together, and a lot of diversity in community.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, there's so many things to consider. But I think one of the reasons Pan has been successful is because like Natalie was pointing out there, like because we don't have a mission statement and we don't follow systems. I personally like systems. I'm come from that background where I kind of wish we had some. Communication here is in some ways non-existent. There's nothing formal, that's for sure. And sometimes it drives me crazy. But then I have to notice, like, I've lived in other communities and they didn't last very long. The community that had real solid systems and they're like, okay, we have this view and we're gonna like do this. They didn't even last 2 years, you know, before everyone was like chewing each other's heads off and friendships were broken. And but here there is very little of that. Everything is totally directed by actual needs. So not like huge visions, but like actual needs. We need to grow rice, you know, the kids need to get fed.
Basic needs.
You know, basic needs. Yeah. So the fact that there is no system actually seems to help a lot. And I've been exploring that a lot lately. I don't know if you're familiar with this Aboriginal author, Tyson Yunkaporta. Does he ring a bell? It's from Sand Talk. You know this book? It's so good. But he talks a lot about that in like indigenous contexts. How like, yes, it does seem there is more governance than we have at Pan. We could work on that. So that they're not completely without communication and eldership. But ultimately, there's this like organic thing going on where, you know, spontaneously things happen over meals in the rice field, you know, where actual life is occurring. That's where the lessons come for the children. That's where the conversations occur. That's where conflicts are dealt with. Right. That doesn't always happen, but that tends to be how it works at Pan most of the time. There's certainly conflicts that have been unresolved and we need to figure it out. But overall, like people aren't fighting each other here, which is amazing. Considering how intimately we are all the time. It's pretty incredible. There's never been a major conflict here that I know of. Sorry.
Yeah, please go.
What's that?
Please continue. You were about to.
I was just like trying to sum up like not having a strong vision actually is, you know, again, like this is a view, like the modern view is like, you know, we go to school, we get the degree, we have the plan, we do the thing. But sometimes that's helpful. But at the end of the day, nature is wild, spontaneous, and unpredictable. And so are humans. And so there has to be this like sort of foundation in wild unpredictability, which can be embodied in a surprisingly beneficial way. And I think Pan's been able to do that quite well. And a lot of that is certainly because of Joe, which Joe, of course, doesn't want to say that he's a leader. but he certainly has like inspired this, you know, with
Right.
all of us, and we all respect him a lot.
Yeah, it remind me of it sounds like an Isan traditional community, like which
Sure.
is like the local northern or northeast community in existing community. It is
Yeah.
like people kind of really tune into each other in a
Mhm.
very deep and subtle level, and much less structural communication or system.
Mhm.
You can go into a community in Isan community and then observing things going on, but you don't really know who is regulating things to happen.
Yeah.
And then you don't really know who is the host or who take leadership.
Yeah.
It's like you cannot identify who is the host of the event,
Totally.
which is quite I have to refer back to Gaia Ashram, which is like maybe a little different than Pan, as we have, I would say, more member who are international member more than Thai member. So we need a lot more structures for communication, because when thing that is not being communicated or misunderstood, or people are not at the same pace, it can cause us more intensity of things, and then it will take more energy again later to kind of bring back the harmony again. So yeah, maybe this is something a little different from Gaia Ashram, where we need to have a lot. Well, I would say a lot, as I am Isan person who prefer less, but I would say a lot that was structure in place for communication, for decision making.
Yeah.
There's some question in the chat, but let's go to Na. Do you have other questions that you want to ask before we gather some questions from the participants?
No, I just noticed the reflection that Greg's like, I wish there was sometimes more structures, and you're like, I wish there was sometimes less. It's like you two have switched culture decision, like structural cultures. But I think the questions in the chat are relevant probably to both of you, and they're both something that I'd love to hear the answers from both of you. Is the first one is, I guess they're linked. How do you make decisions in your community?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so this is a challenge. This is a challenge for sure. And it's a big one for me. And it is like, there's learning how to live together amongst your own culture is hard. Living to live cross-culturally is an incredible riddle. And I'm certainly not sure how to do it a lot of the times. But you just try, and okay, another reason Pun has been successful is because we're, you know, we do support each other. We're kind to each other. We're forgiving to each other. Doesn't mean we like understand each other.
But you're willing, you
but,
know, and I think the
what's
thing
that?
is what you're willing, and you've
We're
stepped
willing.
in. Yeah.
That's right.
And the one thing I would say to everyone here, because they probably wouldn't know this, it's not hierarchical, right? Pun
right.
doesn't have one person at the top who's like, everyone's going to do this. So it
That's
differs
right.
quite differently to a lot of other communities.
Yeah.
Not communities, like mainstream formats.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, it happens organically, spontaneously. We have one or two meetings a year. But usually it happens over dinner, or where we're eating food. Like if there's something that really, and you'd have to empower yourself to speak up, which personally, I think, you know, another thing, like when you're developing as any relationship, you don't know what you need to do until it's time to do it in a lot of cases, right? Well, we're at a point 22 years in where we're realizing we have to get some systems. There has to be a method for addressing some of these things, because it is, you know, like Joe actually isn't that involved with Pun that much anymore. He is, but he isn't, you know, he's not living here. And so his presence is not so strongly felt. And so suddenly there is a different dynamic it's a very different dynamic. And he had a charisma to him that allowed people to speak a lot. Without him here, it's harder. And so power dynamics and struggles, I mean, this is very challenging terrain, and you have to be very careful. And we're navigating. And I think that another aspect of Thai culture is saving face, being really cool, land of smiles all the time, play it cool. And so a lot of those things that need to be said don't get said. And so you have to figure out how to do it. And a lot of times we just don't know. So you guess and you make mistakes and you figure it out eventually, because if you said the wrong thing at breakfast, you can't hide. You're going to show up at lunch and figure it out.
Right. Oh, well, I think I imagining Pan is having this style of like Isan community, probably influenced by Joe, as Joe coming from Isan culture.
Sure.
I think if I haven't starting Gaia Ashram with my partner who is having more of the Western culture, it might go into the Eastern style, Pan style. And,
well, I think we could learn a lot from each other. I really do.
I think like at Gaia Ashram we have more. I think now the number of the Thai members and the international members from the Western background culture, or even from Asian region, but different part of Asian region that have been for culture also joining us. So I think I say like it is quite a little different, as every communication system have to be quite clear. Like we need to have our daily check-in and then weekly check-in, having a weekly meeting of who is doing what, and then checking in like how things went, and then how everybody is, what support they need, and if any decision need to be made in the managerial area, and need to be at least inform the people in the group, and then in case of emergency, still we need to keep that kind of communication of if things need to be changed, we need to keep everyone informed. Otherwise, it can cause, I think, misunderstanding, because we having this also part of a very structural style where everything prepare or plan what thing gonna happen at what time, at what day. At the same time, I think like using from what we learned from the from what I learned from Wongsit Ashram and also Isan style, to trying to balance that with the flexibility and the flow. I think I think it's interesting to see these two different styles based on the kind of the group of people who are there. I think.
Totally. Like I think like when when Peggy and Joe were here more, probably more from Peggy than Joe actually. We did have, probably not as tight of a schedule as you're referring to, but there was definitely a schedule that was followed, and things were more clean, like for sure. We had systems, like our seeds didn't cross-pollinate as much because we had systems and we're communicating, So there's a lot of benefit in there. But what I'm really thinking about, as you say that is I wonder how you, like, one thing, a challenge I think we've had over the years is we're, because when you're in a village, there's more than just like, we busted a pipe and we need to fix it. There's like emotions, there's like mental health. And this is something that I think we need to level up on and figure out, okay, how do we show up for each other and check in and make people feel comfortable learning how to do that for each other. That's been a challenge, I think, for us. I think same. And then I think like when we become to, so how to say, coming to the reductionistic of role, and then everyone having a very clear role and just keep themselves there. And then when things emerging happen that is not very clearly defined of whose role is that, and it tends to fall back to the founder. Of people who are, so I think how can we, like what you said,
something that holds us together as like sense of belonging, that sense of ownership, of sense of belonging, of this is us, this is our community, and eventually we have to put ourselves forth more than what we agree, because something is not just what is designed in the structure, but it's the spirit of it, the connection with it that is there. I think what I can hear from you that is quite strong at Panpan, where people maybe when they are less structured, like Isan culture also, then they are become more considerate and thinking of like what the others might need. Maybe that's what I think. Are there other?
I was just thinking about them. So you said that for people who don't know Panpan, Joe and Peggy were founders along with some other members, and they used to live on the farm full time, and now they're a little bit off the farm. So it's a big change in culture and a big change in, I guess, like Greg, you said, the charisma of Joe not being there. So can you tell us some ways that your like Panpan's thinking about how to move forward? So how to kind of change, and it's difficult to even pin a question because there's no systems, like you say. It's not like Joe has these things on his board that he takes care of. It's not written down anywhere, but there's that you know that when there's a almost like it's almost like a power vacuum. It's not a power vacuum, but you know, how do you plan succession, or how do you move succession into the next generation, thinking of your daughter also?
It's a good question, and I think it really I think I have trust that because of there's enough good conditions set up around us that we're going to grow into that. I think my observation, my feeling is we've been avoiding that conversation for a while because it's difficult, you know, but it's very obvious it needs to happen. My feeling is it's probably going to happen soon. Joe just got back from America.
Exciting.
You can feel it, you know, like, and what we'll probably do is live into it. I don't think we'll have like some retreat where we like discuss it, you know.
You're not going to strategize.
But you can feel it. Like when you live with people this much, you start to feel what people are thinking, you know, like it's very palpable that everyone knows we're shifting into a new level. The children are growing up, you know, and we're growing up. We're tired. We have volunteers who are coming that need energy. You know, there's so many things that we have to address. And the level of our seed bank is quite large. Like there's all sorts of things. I think we'll live into it. I think like this is the natural system, right? Like really going back to observing how does nature work when there's conflict. It magically comes together, and things in Panpan always do that. It's rough for me. I wish we'd just have a retreat and talk about it, but I don't think we're going to.
And I know this is a theme that a lot of eco-villages, like long-standing eco-villages all over the world, are kind of grappling with as well. I don't know, what's the situation at Gaia Ashram, and do you have any thoughts about succession or future generations?
Yeah, I think there is something happening at Gaia Ashram. You know, Gaia Ashram is founded by myself and my husband, and also we didn't plan to create an eco-village from the beginning. We weren't sure. We were just thinking of like regeneration project, ecosystem restoration, working with local farmers, and open for volunteers and people who want to come and learn together. Eventually, as it grows and evolves, and then we realize that to continue to evolve, we need more people involved, and more people in the sense of more long-term commitment, not only volunteers that come and go in short time. So then we start to think of like forming an eco-village, meaning open up for long-term residents to join us. And eventually then we come to the point where we need to design the structures. Again, we design the structure of how can people get involved, how can people become members. at Gaia Ashram. So it needs to go through a process where they need to try out first. They need to join our program first to see if it's the right place for them, and then also we are the right for each other. And then take a long-term internship, for example, 6 months, 1 year, to know that can they find a role to be and able to find a balance for their life to be at the community. And then now we start to have more permanent members, not a lot yet. We have now about 8 to 10 people, and open for a few more and on the process of becoming members. And in this stage, we are thinking already about the transition where we can transition from the founders' power to the collective management. So we start to involve people in the decision-making process. If people have committed already to the point of being the resident, then they can have a certain level of involvement in and certain power in decision making with us, me and Tom. But still at the moment, me and Tom still holding the final decision to see that if anything that happened in different area is like aligned with the policy and the vision of the place. And once it's people have lived to the phase of being the resident, and then they can, and also as the managerial area, they can make decisions in their own area. And we hope that in the future it can be operate through the kind of committee, the committee or the association or something. And we are at the beginning stage of it, where we start slowly involving people in the decision making. And myself and Tom start to put ourselves a bit off. So we plan also, like maybe in 5 years, 10 years, we can slowly trying to be a bit more absent. So then people can operate it, and then eventually we can retire completely. So it might take 10 years.
Yeah, start now, huh?
Yeah.
One question in the chat actually that's linked to this. So less about the social structures or the social agreements you have for taking over succession. What about the resources, the land itself? Like, how is that set up? Who owns it? And how does that work when you pass it from one generation to the next? Greg?
Yeah, I wish Rampai was here to answer that one.
You can pass if you don't.
I think I know. So basically, I'm sure you can speak to this too, because it's difficult, right? Like, because land ownership is an interesting riddle in Thailand. And a lot of times what happens is you have to, you get the land from someone who you just trust, and you trust that they're not going to lie to you, and they give you their land because they're not legally allowed to like write it over. But there is a way to do that, and it's a long process of becoming like a business essentially. But like the whole board of the village, like headman and everyone on that board has to like unanimously agree, and there's so much to do. But that has recently happened. It took 20 years, but I believe that has recently happened, and so Pun Pun is now officially our land instead of just like buddy thing. Wow. And Joe has always, I mean, he's the one who like got it, but he never was like, this is mine. It was always like owned by everyone, and like our house is like ours. But the way Pun Pun is run is everything belongs to everyone. So if Rampai and I and our family leaves, for sure other people are going to be living in our house. Like there's like a radical experiment in sharing resources here. So there is no like, I mean, on paper now, since that happened, there are 3 members of the community that are on that paper. But in reality, it's everyone. Everyone who's a part of Pun Pun owns everything, has access to everything, has say in everything. But technically, I don't know. You want to speak to that more, Om? It's technical silliness.
Sure. In case of Gaia Ashram, now the land is owned by, legally is under my name, and it's inherited land from my father, and
Yeah.
the investment into the land, in everything, every investment has come mostly from my husband in the beginning. For the first, I see, like 10 years, it's still mostly. So it's a lot of investment in there. You can see that it is not so easy to easily just let go, because with that level of investment, it's just showing that we are really committed to create something that we want to see happening in the world, and we want to make sure that it take on to that direction. So then we are really open for people who share the vision, come to co-create an open space for creativity. It can be manifesting in many forms. However, in terms of the land, now it's also registered under a company called Gaia Regeneration. And then in the future, we would, when we withdraw, and then for the people in the community to operate the property themselves, we might just turn into, if we need to move out, for them to have the full authority, we might just pay a role as this whole place rent to this association. The collective group of people might just become an association, and they own this company, and then they just pay the rent for the place, or they just so then they have the full ownership of it. That is one direction that it can go, as I discussed with Tom, but also there can be other alternatives. But we think like having that kind of having the collective feel that they also have sense of ownership in that may help them to be more committed. As we are aware that we have quite strong, maybe a bit more strong than Picho approach. We are quite strong in terms of the vision that we want this Gaia Ashram to be a regenerative project, both in terms of education and in terms of the landscape. So we want to see the progress in the aspect of regeneration. So we want to see like what have been regenerated socially, culturally, ecologically, financially, to sustain itself. So if the group operating this well and then like take it on, we are happy to just start another project somewhere else. And and now we are fortunate to have another piece of land that is donated by a friend who want to donate a place and the fund to build a residential area for the members. So then in that area, then we are designing their ownership also. How would that be in terms of ownership? Maybe they rent of their own house, or they build their own house, or the association build a house and they rent it. So they have a bit more ownership, and so then people take care of their own space. So it's still a lot of discussing, because I think for us this is relating to our plan of transitioning to the collective, but we are not having very clear yet, still exploring. There's just some ideas pop up here and there. I think we will take our time in these 10 years.
Yeah, so perhaps with the legal side of things, it's a little clearer because it's legal, but in terms of the people, it's important that they feel the sense of ownership, because I know that's been a challenge in other eco-villages where they didn't own the land, or they, like you said, Greg, the land was kind of happily borrowed from a friend, and then as long as their relationship is good, then that's solid. But if the relationship, something happens and we can't predict the future, then that becomes a challenge for the community and for the members. So we've got about 5 minutes left now. I just wanted to open up and see if there's anything else, Greg, you want to share that's come up for you, or if there's anything else you're curious about from Greg's point of view in Pon.
There is a question here you want to answer, Greg. How do you sustain the committee financially?
Financially, yeah, that's a great question. That's one of the rewards of living this way. It's pretty awesome, you know? I mean, if you can manage to get people together on land that are committed and serious about sharing resources, living simply, growing good food, there's a lot of ways to make enough money to provide for yourselves because you're sharing all your resources, especially if you're making your house out of mud or bamboo or whatever's growing on your land. And, you know, you're not trying to like live extravagantly. You know, we live very simply here. We basically like all our income goes basically into a pot. We each have a very small stipend every month, which basically comes out to about $200 per person per month. And usually we save all that because we don't spend it because all our needs are met here. You know, the rest of the money that we make, we put into a pot for like medical expenses. So if someone gets really sick, we provide for people's medical expenses. You know, things that are mandatory for people, those needs are covered. Like you know, one of the young boys here, I think you know them, Bong Bong, he's going to school now, and we get to pay for all the things that he needs for that. You know, sharing resources, that's a huge reward of this life. You don't need nearly as much money as people think.
Thank you. I second that what Greg said also. And in the communities, I think like the people and the organization or the collective need to share the burdens of the financial burden. So we have our common activities where we generating incomes and that people get paid in their salary as a minimum salary that help them to live. But if people want to earn more, they are encouraged to start like a micro business in the community, because some people just, I need more, I want to work more. Some people, I don't want to work more, I want to read more. I have enough. So then then the people could have that opportunity, I think, to make themselves more financially sustainable.
Totally.
Also,
and we do that with our kids too. Like that's a cool opportunity for if homeschooling is part of the dream. You know, that's such a cool way to like really get the kids involved. Like learn how to make a cake and sell it to the people at the workshop.
Yes, yeah, we can start learning about managing our economic life from the children. That I think that's a good thing of being living in community. Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Are there any other questions left from the chat?
I think not. No, that's everything that's come up in the chat. And I think we're nearly at time, so we can wrap up here and say thank you so much for coming along, Greg. And sorry, Rampai clearly is still telling bedtime stories.
Yeah. Yeah. And for people who are curious and interested to learn more about the Ecovillage lifestyle and Ecovillage design education, next year, January, we are organizing Ecovillage design education, learn how to build and sustain an eco-village. I heard that Greg and Rampai planning to make a visit to us during that time also. We will send invitation to the time where you can share more of your story. So if people come to want to learn more, so that is like check out our website and GaiaSchoolAsia.com. We have information about the Ecovillage design education and Ecovillage lifestyle. Also at Pan, there's a website that you can search for find more information about Pan and GENOA as well. You want to invite people to do or to anything to the GENOA activities now, or how they get involved?
Yeah, so we have I'm muted now. We have our website, which is GENOA Ecovillage. I'm posting all the links in the chat so you can get them there, and we'll post them on the website as well afterwards when we post the video. At the moment, we have community calls biannually, and we have a newsletter. So if anyone out there from an Ecovillage wants to share any of their write-ins, Greg, we'd love to have some of your write-ins on our blog. Any events upcoming, then please share with us and we'll share out to the community. And if anyone wants to get involved in anything, you can also contact us via the website if you want to volunteer or connect with any of the communities. Yeah, so thank you so much for inviting us today. And thank you, Greg. Thank you, for organizing this. I think it's a really great initiative to get to know some of the eco-villages in a bit more detail.
Yes, thank you. And we will have our next talk again in 2 or 3 weeks. We will send a notification on our page and our email, so stay tuned. And for the previous talk, including this talk also, we're gonna upload the video on our YouTube channel as well. So the previous one, if you want to see and listen to, you can check out our YouTube channel, Gaia Ashram. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here together. Thank you so much, Greg. I would personally want to visit sometime soon and talk more about all this stuff.
Come. Yeah.
Thank you.
So nice to see you both, everyone.
ขอบคุณค่ะ บ๊ายบาย
โชคดี